You're watching NewsX. I'm Rishabh Gulati. Ladies and gentlemen, there are many things happening in the country simultaneously and many incalculable strings that are pulling us in all different directions globally. We take a hiatus because we are currently undertaking in India the biggest exercise in self-governance in the history of the planet. This election in India right now is the biggest ever in history. The biggest ever. 120 million people have just voted in a single day. 120 million people are going to vote again in a couple of days. And by the end, nearly 1 billion people would have cast a vote over the scope of 2 months. So while we are in hiatus during a political season, does that mean that everyone else is waiting for us to finish? No, a lot of developments are taking place. 3 weeks ago, the Chinese decided that they want to go on a new map proxy war. They're going to come and take 30, 40 more places in Arunachal Pradesh and start changing their names and start claiming them. Simultaneously, one can argue that on the good side, it's been pretty quiet on the Indo-Tibet border. We haven't seen loss of life to the scale and impact of what we saw in Galwan when things got completely out of hand. It's been very quiet on Chinese companies and trade. India-China trade is once again booming. You've seen one of the biggest Chinese car manufacturers, if not the biggest Chinese electric car manufacturer, BYD, its cars are for sale in India now. A lot of big business houses are still relying on China to provide expertise. I have equipment that is being bought, and much of it is being sourced from China. And at the same time, we've been discussing China Plus One and, of course, the iPhone being manufactured in India. So in the end, ladies and gentlemen, the bottom lines remain and they have not changed, nor will they change. China is a large country that's the number 2 GDP in the world. It's not going to disappear. They're going to have to live with us and we're going to have to live with them. But on what terms? As we speak, and while we've been busy with elections here, a new information support force has been inaugurated by President Xi Jinping. Most people analyze it as a cyber warfare unit. You've seen property scandals happen recently. You've seen sports medal scandals happening recently. And you've seen a total purge or rejig, however you want to call it, of the Chinese establishment in terms of its ministers for defense and foreign affairs. So once the elections are over, and they'll be over very shortly, okay, what is our China action plan? Ambassador Veena Sikri joining us on the broadcast. General Dhruv Katoch with us. Rabinder Sachdev with us. And Professor Madhav Nalapat. Professor Nalapat, what is going on while we are busy with elections? We still have to keep an eye on the north.
Well, look, Rishabh, I'd like to say that you're quite right. The Chinese have gone on a renaming spree. In fact, they want to change the name of Tibet. They don't like anyone calling Tibet Tibet. They want to call it Xizang. And the fact is, 2/3 of Tibet, they have removed and placed in 2 of the provinces of China. Whereas that is the whole point. I mean, the whole reason why the Dalai Lama suspended talks was that he wanted to talk about the whole of Tibet. And the Chinese side said, no, only that part of Tibet, which is called the Tibetan Autonomous Region, which is absolutely not autonomous at all. So the reality is that this is what is going on. At the same time, if you look at the historical records, Ambassador Sikri will bear me out. Look at it just from the 1990s. Systematically, the Chinese have sought to weaken India. They have boosted Pakistan's military power. They have given the Pakistan Air Force, they have given the Pakistanese army missile capability, nuclear capability. In all across our neighborhood, they are creating problems. Whenever they can, they want to ensure that India is in a weakened state. Now, for some time, yes, we will have to depend on imports from China. But I do believe that it's only a matter of time before substitutes are found for these kind of imports, especially, for example, in pharma. An effort is already on to find substitutes, and in other ways also, efforts will be on to find substitutes. I want to end this segment by saying, who made China modern China? Taiwan. Taiwanese companies came to China, And when they taught the Chinese about supply chain management, they went and about manufacture and improving of manufacturing processes. And now the Taiwanese are looking at India. And they're not looking just at manufacturing, they're looking at AI, they're looking at high tech. And they have a direct interest in ensuring that India grows. So the point is, therefore, we are definitely in competition with China. Anyone who believes that Chinese will give up their plan of weakening India is living in a delusional world. But at
Okay.
the same
Yes. Well.
time,
Well.
there are
Well.
certain
Yeah.
realities that we face.
Yes, Professor Alpat. But at the same time, you and I can now start driving around in Chinese electric cars, which are now on sale in India. And many thousands of people might be tempted. I don't want to know what all chips and navigation units are available in those cars and how they will utilize. So I don't know. So let me get General Katoch in. General Katoch, just yesterday, the United States sanctioned Chinese firms for supplying ballistic missile technology to Pakistan. No big news. They've been doing it for 30 years. You've seen the forming of this information warfare unit by Xi Jinping. You've seen the purge that's happened in the political realm. But at the same time, we've seen, at least to the best of our knowledge, no major incident on the Indo-Tibet border. So have we found a new normal? Have we found a new point of balance? General Katoch?
Thank you, Rishabh. Rishabh, I didn't get the last part of your question.
Have we found a new point of balance? Because we don't seem to be seeing any major incidents, but at the same time, we can't assume that the hostility is gone because they're still talking about Arunachal. But at the same time, we are allowing Chinese car manufacturers to sell in India. Is it mixed signals or is it a fair balance?
No, let me put it in a different perspective. I'm totally with Professor Madhav Nalpat. The threat of China will remain. Even if we have good friendly and trade relations, that threat is not going to go away. The only way in which our borders can remain stable is if India is strong economically and militarily to pose adequate cost in case of any misadventure by China. Now, should we achieve that state, take it from me, there will be no war, because that war cannot be won by Xi Jinping and he will not undertake such a venture. But let me put the converse also. Should India at any stage of time, if Xi Jinping and his Communist Party think that India is weak and they have a chance at victory, he will grab it. So the question is not will there be war or will there not be war or will the border situation stabilize? That stage of hostility will remain and it will become active hostilities when the Chinese feel they can actually come and win. I don't think that stage is there now. Now, this reorganization which they have done is really because of the realization. Basically, the reorganization started in 2015 when we had the Strategic Support Force, when that came in. And now they have simply renamed the Strategic Support Force to the Information Support Force.
Yes.
By separating those separate wings, the cyber and the space, etc., and electronic warfare. Now, I want to give you this theory of mine that if you are looking at a conflict anywhere in the world, whether it is between India and China or between China and anybody else, you see it is going to start off with the cyber domain.
Yeah, but when we say start off is an assumption that is already not occurring, I'm going to draw an assumption that it is already underway. We lost you for a second, sir, but the assumption is that it's already underway, that tens of thousands of attacks per month are probably taking place as we speak.
It is already underway, I agree there, but it has not taken on a militaristic turn yet. That is why if you are looking into cyber, it'll get very nasty when that starts. And that will follow space warfare, it will follow rocket warfare, and then
it comes down to probably drones after that. We're losing your connection, sir. I'll come back to you once that stabilizes. So let me get Ambassador Sikri into this conversation. Ambassador Sikri, again, less than 48 hours ago, we have now made public, and we have the photos available of Indian-made cruise missiles, BrahMos, being landed in the Philippines. Now, China is going to consider that a hostile move, not a friendly gesture, and they're not going to sit on their hands. So once we get past our general elections, which of course, keeping us our mind space busy right now, how do we then turn our eye back? What is then going to happen? What should we be ready for?
Well, I think, first of all, we have to recognize that China is not going to let up at all. Their position on weakening India, on trying to humiliate India in every way, sometimes by ridiculous means like renaming places in Arunachal Pradesh, it has not an iota of impact on the people of Arunachal Pradesh. But China thinks they're getting something to do because they are trying to show to their people that they have the upper hand. The talks on the situation in Ladakh are still continuing. They have these dialogues every time, but obviously the Chinese are not letting up at all, and they're preventing Indian herders from grazing their cattle in the no man's land, which was being done earlier. So those talks are on that. I think we have to be very careful. China is modernizing. They are taking on cyber warfare and cyber security in a big way. We have to be prepared to tackle that. But I do also think that this business of Xi Jinping doing repeated purges within his army and defense forces is an indication of some kind of weakness within. You don't do it again and again and again. Maybe you do it once, maybe twice. But even in the year of Galwan in 2020, he changed the leader of the Western Theatre Command 3 times. And now after that, you've heard about 2 or 3 different purges. Are these all his political opponents? Or does he think he has more and more political opponents and he's insecure? Is that showing this? Or I also think that we have to look at the situation of the Chinese economy. It's not very good at the moment at all. And I think the Chinese economy is not recovering in any way. We have seen that their foreign exchange reserves are falling, their stock market values are falling, and this is very bad for the Chinese people because they invest a lot on the stock market hoping to make a lot of money. And we've seen unemployment among the youth is very high. So I think China is going through a turmoil within, and they're trying to cover up the turmoil within by taking very aggressive postures abroad.
Yes.
We do know that their CPEC with Pakistan is not going anywhere.
Yes.
And we know that after the Chinese engineers were killed, work has more or less stopped on that. We do know that China is very worried about Apple coming more and more to India and more Apple phones being produced in India. The Taiwan-India relationship is growing stronger and stronger. So we have to maintain a hard line. I think what you're absolutely right, the supply of the BrahMos missile to Philippines is a marked change in the situation in that region. Because earlier, Philippines was very wary of China. And even on the 9-dash line, even on the situation in the South China Sea, Philippines was always taking a very modest approach. But now they have given up on that. And they have revived their relationship with the USA strongly, with India as well. So this is a churning of the geopolitical situation that is going to continue. I do not see
So Ravinder Sachdev,
up.
are you assessing that there is now peak China? The worst that had to happen has already happened, and we saw that at about 3 years ago, and now this is as bad it could have gotten. We're going to see a 10 status quo, but the status quo is going to be stable, meta-stable at least, for the next several years, or do you think the worst is yet to come?
Higher tensions are still to come, let's say, if not the worst, right? I mean, more intensities, I think, are definitely out there because you see, China is racing towards modernizing itself, whichever way we may call it, economy-wise, but more technology-wise and military-wise, in order to be in a position to challenge the US in the entire Indo-Pacific for the Taiwan project, right? That's been the game of China that, 2047, if not 47, but Xi Jinping has said that within our generation, we need to settle the Taiwan question. And now, by the way, looking at the Ukraine war and the way the world is splitting, I think China is actually racing or trying to race as much as it can to advance, modernize its technology and military capabilities. And I think this has become even more urgent for China because due to the Ukraine war especially, what the West and NATO are realizing is that their defense inventories have been so low, they're rapidly increasing their production facilities, right? They are getting real-time ideas of, a warfare and intense warfare which is out there. New learnings about drones and new technologies and AI, etc. So China is, I think, would be and is looking at how the NATO and the US are modernizing. And by the way, the US itself has realized even before the Ukraine war that, let's say, with regards to their Navy, they've been left behind the Chinese. So the US is now aggressively pumping in money to boost its defense production, defense protection, and defense offense capabilities. So I think that's the scenario there with respect to these.
Professor Nalapat, we don't want antagonism with China. I can see no particular reason for us because we don't have any expansionist urges or tendencies, but it is being thrust upon us. Having been thrust upon us, let us not ignore that just in the past few months, a lot of drama has happened in the Maldives, whose president has spent a long time in Beijing coming up with all sorts of official agreements, and what all unofficial agreements happen behind closed doors, we don't know. At the same time, I've mentioned the very public renaming of large parts of Arunachal. But if they are constantly in our backyard, is it more than reasonable that we need to be in theirs, that we need to have a tight association with the Philippines, with Vietnam, and this is the road ahead?
Rishabh, as you correctly hinted, this is only a tactical pause and not a strategic pause. The Chinese are desperate because their economy is in very bad shape. You have 27% youth unemployment in China. In a situation where 3 generations have only had it better and better and better each time. Now 27% of youth are unemployed. They are remaining unemployed. Building prices are collapsing. The renminbi is under pressure, and they're desperate to improve their exports, and therefore they are subsidizing their exports and trying to capture markets. But I'm very, very certain that Prime Minister Modi is quite aware of that, and that even for a short term, if a Chinese electric car manufacturers come to India, it will only be until the time India itself ramps up its electric car manufacturing capability and frankly outcompetes the Chinese. I'm sure that that is going to happen in the next few years. The reality is the threat of China is not going to go away. What the Chinese are now, they never believed that India and the West can come together. They never believed India and the US can come together. They always thought in a Nehruvian non-alignment, India and Russia, but never India and the US.
Okay.
It's a nightmare for them that India and the US are coming together. They are playing nice. They're not being nice, they're playing nice. And I agree with all the other discussants. We have to be extremely careful and we have to keep our guard up. And that's what is exactly happening on the frontier. The frontier is being mobilized as never before. Our defenses are being strengthened as never before under Prime Minister Modi.
Yes, true that. But at the same time, Ravinder Sachdev, how do we then digest? And the complexity is not only for us, it's even bigger in terms of dollars for the Americans. Our bilateral trade is year by year hitting new records, and our trade deficit with China year by year is hitting new records. Our trade deficit alone has gone up from $60 billion to $100 billion. Bilateral trade is almost $150 billion. All new records despite everything that's happened.
Certainly, Rishabh. I mean, I'll just take quick 2 bullet points in a bigger picture. I think the theme of this topic today was also that what should India do going ahead with the next government or whatever, and
yes,
is it a normal new balance, the calm on our frontiers? 2 things. In the big picture, I think what we need is peace and calm and no conflict with China for the next 10 odd years for exactly the reasons all of us understand, that our economy, technology, R&D, etc., go up. But that does not mean that if China engages in any adventures, we'll kind of sit back and take it. So there's that, situation we got to balance out. But the next 5 to 10 years, maybe we need no conflict or even the long term. That's one. Second, yes, apart from all the, economic growth, technology growth, infrastructure, military that we do, etc., and aggressive, and we go into their backyard, they come into our backyards, I think we should carry a small trick in our pocket also, which I've been often calling a gardens of peace proposal. Let us mislead them, misguide them, let them think about it. Let's throw out this idea that, you know what, on our line, on the border, there are about 40, 45 odd or maybe more or less disputed areas, some small in size, some bigger, some undefined in size. Let's say to them, guys, you know what? We got to live and let live. Let's start with a pilot garden of peace, neither yours nor ours, strategically not to give up any our vantage points, and they will also not give up any vantage points. So probably this thing won't happen. But what it will do is that, if we go into war, if I go into war, I think I want to carry all different kinds of tools and arsenals to use or maybe even mislead my opponent.
Okay.
So I think this garden of peace is something which I think we should toss.
Yeah, so General Katoch, are then we drawing an assumption that our future moves need to be responsive still, that if they do something which is provocative, which is, for example, having the Maldivian president sitting with you for 8 days while he just come after wearing India get out a T-shirt back home, that we will respond, but unless they do something, we don't have to provoke them.
Rishabh,
Yeah, go ahead, sir. We can hear you fine. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, you can hear me, right? You see, I think it's not a question of whether we are provoking the Chinese. We have to look after our interests. And if our interests, say, align with the United States in the Indo-Pacific as part of the Quad and get the ASEAN along board, well, that is our interest. If the Chinese get provoked, that is just too bad. But we have got, when we are looking at the continent, we have got different interests. So we will play that differently. You know, the idea of having a garden of peace, Mr. Dev Saab has so nicely put across, we have tried that for 70 years. It doesn't work. The Chinese are just not interested. And they have been every time exploiting this very idea of the garden of peace, etc., etc. I'm glad we have put it very frankly. I mean, not to put down Mr. Sachdev, you know, who's brilliant in his own right. But as a practical fellow, a chap on the ground, I'm telling you, it doesn't work. So they have to be told, listen, you do anything, there will be a very firm response. From our side, we won't stop it. We won't start it. But we cannot allow the Chinese to do what they are doing. If they are arming Pakistan, it's absolutely appropriate for us to arm the ASEAN countries. There is no way in which India is going to support the CPEC, which is going down the drain. As far as the Ukraine war is concerned, it is not that we were supporting Russia. We were supporting Indian interests because we wanted the oil. So ultimately, I'm thinking, you know, whatever we do, our interests come first.
Yes.
The government is very firmly committed to strengthening the armed forces, as we can see by the way the reorganizations have taken place within the armed forces, the infrastructure which is being built, and the emphasis now being put on Make in India. Now, these are all great positives which were not there earlier.
Yes.
So I think the way I look at it is the next 5 years are really going to be game changers with the present government.
Yes, but put on record for people watching who might have an interest in China, that India's official position is very, very diplomatically relaxed. We say nothing on Tibet. We hardly say anything on Taiwan. We are not constantly publishing our own maps claiming large parts of China, because that is not the theosophy with which we've been working. So I'll leave the last word with Ambassador Sikri. But Ambassador Sikri, the Chinese have made hay with us not provoking them. That they wait to quietly move in everywhere, whether it is in our near neighbors, whether it is it's in our oceanic regions. The number of Chinese boats and vessels and ships, naval ships operating in the region are also at record highs. We know how they've eaten up all the territory slowly. So at what point of time is it okay to be reactive because we don't want an antagonistic stand, and where do we need to be proactive?
No, I think we have to plan very carefully. In some cases, action speaks more than word. The Dalai Lama has been living in India for decades. So whatever you may or may not say on Tibet, China is very suspicious of India's views on Tibet because His Holiness Dalai Lama is here for all the decades and he loves it here. And he speaks so warmly about India all the time. On Taiwan, our relationship with Taiwan speaks words and volumes. The growing economic and trade relationship with Taiwan has got China very worried. But in my mind, the key is going to be what happens in the American elections this year. Because if the Democratic Party comes back to power, they're going to try and continue this G2 approach with China. But if the Republicans come back, I think there's going to be a very strong turning of the screws on China, as it were, and we have to watch and see what will happen at that time. In the meantime, our preparations have to go on very firmly.
Yeah, I think what happens in the elections here in India also matters, because the Chinese, certainly the embassy sitting here in Delhi, would be hoping to report back in a couple of months' time that there is chaos in Indian politics and an unstable government.
I don't think they'll get that joy. I
don't expect it either, but that's what they'll be hoping on, banking on, perhaps be maliciously and malifiedly doing more than hoping and banking as well. The reason we've had this conversation is to digest all these developments all together, because our eye is on the north. There is no business in India doing any provocation. But if you think we're going to keep on sitting here for decades like we have had in the past, while you chew up everything around us and throttle us with a ring of pearls or ring of diamonds or ring of whatever, and we're going to stand around and take it. I think that India now is turned into Bharat. Thank my guests.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.